It all started in a quiet Austrian town, right beneath a seemingly ordinary house with a bright red roof and neatly trimmed hedges. You know, the kind of place where neighbors greet each other with a smile and everyone locks their doors at night, thinking that evil is just a story for movies. But hidden away in the basement, something sinister lurked. It was tucked behind a steel door, cleverly disguised as a shelf, and it had been there for a staggering 24 years. Back in 1984, Joseph Fritzl spun a tale to everyone, claiming his daughter Elizabeth had run away. She was 18, rebellious, ungrateful, or so he said, and he insisted she join some cult. The police jumped into action, searching high and low, posters plastered everywhere, while her mother was left in tears. Meanwhile, Joseph shook his head, feigning disappointment over how she'd shattered their family. The shocking truth: Elizabeth was just a mere 20 feet below them, trapped in a cell he had constructed with his own hands. He poured years into crafting that place, a twisted maze of narrow corridors and soundproof rooms, all reinforced with concrete and sealed tight with an electronic lock that only he could access. To his wife, he painted it as a storage space, later claiming it was for safety in case of a nuclear attack. But the reality was far darker. It was his own private kingdom, a domain of control and manipulation. When Elizabeth innocently offered to help him with something down there, he knocked her out with ether, dragged her into the abyss, and locked the door behind him. At first, she screamed until her throat bled. No one heard. Upstairs, her family ate dinner. Days turned to weeks. The lights flickered on and off at his command. He brought food when he felt like it. Sometimes he spoke kindly, like a father should, and sometimes he beat her with a rage that didn't belong to this world. Months turned into years, and Elizabeth eventually stopped trying to scream. Can you imagine that? She began to mark time by the sound of his footsteps echoing through the dark, oppressive space. He came down almost every night, and with each visit, her reality grew more twisted. She became pregnant over 7 times in total. Heartbreakingly, one child didn't survive long after birth. The 3 he left with her, trapped in that suffocating darkness, were all she had. The others, he carried them upstairs, leaving them on the doorstep with notes in her handwriting, claiming she'd abandoned them. His wife believed those lies, raising those children with love and care, completely unaware that their mother was hidden beneath her very feet. As the years folded into decades, Elizabeth's hair lost its luster, turning dull and lifeless. The air down there was heavy and damp, recycled through cheap ventilation pipes that did little to keep the space livable. The walls, perpetually weeping moisture, felt like they were closing in. The children grew up pale and quiet, never knowing the warmth of sunlight. They learned to whisper, to hide when their grandfather came down, and played with scraps of paper and old books, illuminated only by the flickering glow of a single bulb. Elizabeth did her best to teach them how to read, how to hope, how to dream of a world bigger than those concrete walls. She never dared to tell them how close freedom was, hanging just above their heads. She couldn't bear the thought of breaking their fragile spirits with that truth. In 2008, one of the basement children, Kirsten, aged 19, fell dangerously ill. Her skin was gray, her body shutting down. Elizabeth begged her father to take the girl to a hospital. At first he refused, terrified that exposure would end his secret. But even he knew Kirsten would die if he didn't act. He left her at a hospital, claiming she'd been dropped off by her mother. Doctors were absolutely baffled. Malnutrition, organ failure, and decades of neglect were all coursing through her veins. They fired off questions, trying to make sense of Joseph's wild story, but it just didn't add up. Soon enough, police showed up at his house, and Joseph was doing his best to hold the lie together, but cracks were spreading all around him. Eventually, he let Elizabeth come upstairs for the first time in 24 long years to explain what had happened. When the police laid eyes on her, she looked like a ghost, pale as death and trembling with fear. She leaned in and whispered, "If you promise me I'll never have to see my father again, I'll tell you everything." And just like that, the truth spilled out like poison, revealing every harrowing minute of her captivity. Each birth, every scream swallowed by those unforgiving walls. The police opened that hidden door, descended into the basement, and were met with stunned silence. The ceilings felt low and oppressive, the air stale and thick, the walls lined with soundproof foam. There were makeshift beds made of old blankets, a sink rusted to the color of blood, and the smell of decades of despair hung heavily in the air. It was a nightmare brought to life. Joseph Fritzl was arrested immediately. His wife, Rosemary, collapsed when she realized what her home had been hiding. The entire town fell into shock. No one could believe it. The man they'd known as polite, quiet, maybe a little odd, had built hell under his own house. During the trial, Joseph had the audacity to claim he'd given them a good life and insisted that Elizabeth had never tried to escape. Can you believe that? Those words sent chills down everyone's spine. When Elizabeth finally faced him in court, she didn't utter a single word. Instead, she just stared at him as if he were a complete stranger. Because, honestly, that's exactly what he had become to her, a faceless figure from a nightmare. He was sentenced to life in prison, and honestly, that felt like a tiny victory in a world that had seen so much darkness. It was such a relief, right? Elizabeth and her children were quickly whisked away to a secure facility, far from the prying eyes of cameras and the chaos of the outside world. This place was a safe haven, a much-needed sanctuary where they could finally begin that long, winding journey of healing. Experts warned it wouldn't be easy. They'd have to adjust to simple things we often take for granted, like sunlight streaming through a window, the feeling of grass under their feet, and the sheer joy of freedom itself. Just imagine stepping outside for the first time, feeling the breeze on your skin after years of confinement. It must have felt like stepping into a whole new world filled with hope and possibilities. In the years that followed, Elizabeth poured her heart and soul into rebuilding a life that felt somewhat normal, and honestly, her strength is just so inspiring, you know? It's incredible to think about how she had to relearn everything: how to trust, how to enjoy simple pleasures, and how to embrace the world after being locked away for so long. Her children, those who spent their early years in the shadows of that basement, have finally experienced the beauty of the world outside. Can you imagine them seeing mountains for the first time, feeling the soft grass tickle their toes, or listening to the joyful laughter of other kids? It's like they're discovering everything anew, and each little moment is filled with wonder. They've shared those firsts together, like watching a sunset paint the sky in colors they'd only dreamed of. Each giggle and smile is a reminder of resilience, of the human spirit's ability to heal and find joy even after unimaginable pain. It's a journey filled with ups and downs, but through it all, they've found a way to cherish the little things like family dinners, movie nights, and the warmth of a hug. Isn't that just beautiful? But even with all that beauty surrounding them, the haunting shadow of that basement still lingers, you know? You can't just wipe away 24 years of captivity. It's something that stays with you, etched deep in your bones. Imagine trying to fit into a world that feels so foreign after being locked away for so long. It's a tough road, and they've had to learn everything from scratch: simple things like trusting people, making friends, and even enjoying the sunshine. It's a wild mix of joy and lingering pain, like a bitter-sweet melody playing in the background of their lives. In that quiet Austrian town, the house still stands, almost like a ghost of what it once was. It's a stark reminder of the horrors that unfolded there, a place that once held so much darkness. The door to the basement is sealed tight, a heavy weight of silence resting over it, almost as if the house itself is holding its breath. The rooms are emptied of life, and the air feels faintly cold, like it's still haunted by whispers of the past. Some say the silence there is too profound, like it's still listening, waiting for a story that's never going to be told. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? The echoes of the past linger, reminding us that darkness can hide in the most ordinary places, and it's a lesson we should never forget. Always stay aware of the shadows lurking in the corners of our lives.